Pawn shop owners, what was the most illegal thing a customer had brought to your shop?
Not an owner but an employee. A man brought in a bag of cocaine and said if I would buy it then resell it back to him in a couple of days. Employee not owner. A guy brought in a stack of like 15 laptops that all said property of city public school right on the top of each one. He then threatened to shoot me when I told him to get out. Edit, because it's been brought up multiple times. Yes, I am aware that schools/businesses, etc. sometimes sell off old laptops. Which is why I don't flat out call the cops whenever somebody brings in a suspected stolen item. There's always a chance that no matter how obviously stolen it is, the person owns it legit. However, I'm not going to risk my job or my conscience by taking in an item, if it has a label on it claiming it's somebody else's property. Also, how am I supposed to sell a laptop that says property of city public schools on it? Pawn shops have a bad enough rap as it is. Not illegal and not a pawn shop owner, but when my first fiancé and I parted ways I went to go sell my ring. She had given me her ring back, so I went and pawned them because I was broke and I got so many dirty looks for selling an engagement ring. I think they thought I stole it despite what I told them, but a theme's the breaks, I suppose. Hey, I've got a buddy that specializes in stolen goods. Let me call him up and get him over here. The guy literally brought in an RPG. He was doing yard work for this old lady whose husband had passed. She gave it to him for doing some yard work, not realizing it was live and active. The guy was career military, and after the bomb squad came and disabled it, they went to her house and found a trove of similarly very illegal military-grade weapons. Deleted. You just never know what is going to come through that door. A friend of mine owns a rather unique store, not a pawn shop, but he sells a lot of authentic medieval weaponry, armor, clothing and similar. While I was there, a young couple decided his shop was the place to sell a few old SS daggers, belts, flags and other Nazi memorabilia. Solid logic, except for one thing. We are in Germany. Here the state kind of frowns upon owning or selling this kind of stuff. They could have donated it to any museum and would have had no issue with the law whatsoever. I mean, it was not their fault they found it, right? But they figured that if Grandpa was a Nazi, he could at least help with the funds for the renovations and decided cash was better than being named in a museum leaflet. My friend was mostly insulted by the idea that just because he owns a medieval store and sells historic weapons, he must know a Nazi collector that would pay cash, but that was the end of it. He told them to get out and donate it, or if they insist on selling it, to ship it to the US. More money from history buffs, or at least not one happy little German Nazi with a new happy stabby toy. Not a pawn shop employee or owner, but I bought an iPod Classic from a pawn shop and edited some of Hitler's speeches and Nazi music on it. I don't know if that's illegal to have Hitler's speeches, but it's certainly very controversial, especially since I've bought it in Germany, in a region that was always the point of conflict between France and Germany. Edit, thanks for the updates my dudes and dudettes. I don't know if the iPod's contents were specifically illegal, however I would imagine that at least some of the music that was on it was, as it was not historical music but modern sort of shitty metal music like Bozo Uncles and some other bands whose music I most certainly won't listen to. Edit 2, the region where I bought it is called Breisgau and it's in the south of Germany next to France and Switzerland, also known as Dreiländereck, which very roughly translates to where three countries meet. Part of the history of the Alsace, l'Alsace/Sauce Alsace, in Germany is that basically Germany and France have been constantly at war to keep or gain the region, so that the people there, to this day speak German and French because of the constant change in official languages. So having these sentiments is bad and not appropriate, especially at this region. Edit 3, this is getting out of hand. The music was very strange, and for a left-leaning fan of democracy it was very interesting to get a window into that mindset and into how much hate, anger, ignorance, fear and resentment it carries, so whoever owned this iPod must have had a life consumed by hate and fear. As for the iPod, it was in mint condition, so I wiped its storage and put my own music on it, which is quite ironic since I'm a big fan of punk music. The iPod died in an unfortunate drowning accident in my backpack. Not an owner, but I got a call from a pawn shop saying that one of my at-home employees tried to sell her work computer. It is my company's logo and contact info right on it, plain as day. How stupid can some people be? An MP40. Not actually me, but my significant other. He manages a store owned by a national chain. Brought in on pawn, and as with all neat things, he was just waiting for the loan to drop. After 30 days of non-payment, item goes out for sale. At this point he could purchase it. Now I'm not a huge gun historian, but I know the air and style and had to ask, that gun is super rare if it's not full auto. When a gun is taken in on loan, the gun is run, not the person, so our state's Bureau of Investigation was notified of its existence. Not only is a federal stamp for automatic weapon expensive AF, it's also difficult to obtain, so he was no longer going to purchase it. And this is a good thing, because shortly after the gun was seized by ATF, which is when we found out the actual worth, $10,000 to $20,000. Original owner brought it back as a war trophy. Son is the one who got a loan, for, like $200, but it was never registered, so it was contraband. Edit: good news is that it wasn't destroyed but ended up in a museum. Not an owner and not illegal, but one of the guys who worked at the place told me that someone brought in a fuck box, a decent sized box that has a switch on it that turns on a motor inside that has a connection to a dildo, included. Edit: thanks for all the upvotes, and just found this in a video uploaded the other day. Y'all are awesome. I didn't work there but was there at the time. A guy brings in a dead duck, which hunting is illegal in my area, and also why just why. So I'm not an owner and I wouldn't call this illegal per se, but I feel like I have to share this. A friend of mine owns a pawn shop, and one day a dude walks in with a cardboard box filled to the top with his own shit. He claims that it's magic, and my friend cuts him off right there and kicks him out. As he is walking out, he drops the box on accident, gets all of his shit on the floor, sees the mess he's made, stares at the horrid pile of shit for a couple of seconds, and runs out of the shop. My friend never got his name, and never saw him again. The smell would proceed to linger in the shop for a good month after it was cleaned up. Edit: typo. Not a pawn shop, but I've once had a younger man bring an art he claimed to have built to my gun store. He wanted to trade it in for a Ruger AR-556. I gave the rifle a glance over, mostly trying to figure out what the scope would be worth. I quickly noticed it had no serial number, which is entirely illegal. Made up some bullshit about not taking consumer-built arms on trade and took down his name and address, and then notified the sheriff's office. Buddy of mine worked at a pawn shop for a few years. They had a guy try to sell them a police walkie-talkie, like straight stolen from a car but with the battery taken out. They told him to get fucked and called the cops. I believe they picked the guy up a few hours later. I had this guitar that had a little sliding door on the side, meant to hold picks. I put weed in there as a joke. Completely forgot about it as I was selling it. They were chill. Not a pawn shop owner, but was in the pawn shop when this happened. Someone brought in a wheelchair with a tag for the local hospital on the back. Example: property of somewhere hospital. The pawn shop owner told them to leave it and get out. They didn't. He called the non-emergency line. The police came and picked it up and took it back to the hospital, or that's what they said they were doing. In a similar vein, my friend found some weed in the oven he bought from a used appliance store. The shop called him to ask about the oven. Luckily, he didn't give out his address. Just a worker here, but we had a couple come in to pawn their backhoe over the weekend, happens a lot, and brought their bill of sale. They wanted a simple $1,000 loan, which wasn't bad considering how much it was worth. No more than 30 minutes later, cops are there with the owner. Apparently they worked for him and went and pawned all of his industrial equipment. Former employee: I've seen quite a few sawed-off shotguns and short-barreled rifles. Someone even brought in a machine gun, Vomit M76, and not a one was registered. And this is all in rural Georgia. Scary to think what some people can get a hold of. Not a pawn shop owner or employee, but a block away from my high school was a pawn shop. It was announced that everyone in the entire school was going to get a Chromebook to do schoolwork. On the first day that we got the Chromebooks, it was rumored that multiple people had brought them to the pawn shop to make a quick buck. I asked one of my teachers who was in charge of all the Chromebook repairs about this later, and he said that only one student had actually done it that he knew of, and he had used the money to buy weed. I'm not an owner, but I once saw someone try to sell a vintage 1940s concealed firearm to the pawn shop. This was illegal as heck and the owner had to turn him down. Someone tried to sell a rifle. In fucking England. He claimed that it was an air pistol, which is allowed if you keep it locked in a box and have a proper gun license, but we could clearly tell that it was a rifle. Idiot got arrested and landed his butt in prison. Not an owner but a customer. I saw a dude next to me bring in like 3 assault rifles, with the ammo, and around 10 grenades, ready to use. Not sure if it was illegal or not, but it made my antique Hot Wheels collection look like shit.
With